Ladder Season 3 might just be the season of the Sin, but not for the reason you might be thinking. The changes added to the game before its third ladder launch have paved the way for a new class to be the top build, and it just might be the strongest character for ripping through terror zones on Player's Aid. In this video, we'll take a look at some early and late game builds for this absolute savage of a monster and player killer. You gotta protect your terror zone territory somehow. This might be just the way to do it. Quick side note, do you remember the head kick heard round the world? It's hard to tell from this video, but Holly Holmes actually head kicked Ronda Rousey into Teleria in this clip. What's Teleria, you ask? It's the realm in which the sponsor of today's video exists, Raid Shadow Legends. I'm actually not even kidding though. Ronda Rousey has leapt into the world of Raid as her very own champion. And that's just one of the many things going on lately in this insane game. Raid is a legendary turn-based attack game on mobile, and you can finally play it on PC now too. This game is all about collecting heroes and building an unbeatable team, and right now, that's pretty easy to do. There's an absolutely overpowered PvP champion that they just released named Genbo. The internet's blowing up about this guy, so you might want to get him before March 2nd. From now until March 14th, new players can enjoy a special Valentine's Day themed adventure with the Raid Love Quest. There, you can win Valentine's themed Raid champions and even Amazon gift cards worth up to $1,000. Head over to raidlovequest.plarium.com, enter your player ID, and set out on the quest. Even returning players will receive a Valentine's gift courtesy of Raid. Make sure to use my link in the description or the QR code right here. Right here on the screen. When you do, you'll get this insane in-game loot. Check out Raid Shadow Legends today, and while you download that, let's get to the main event. The Trap Sin has always been a solid ladder starting choice. In earlier patches, we saw a realignment of her skill synergies, which made the build even more efficient. But in patch 2.6, we're finally seeing the effects of negative enemy resistance being applied to trap skills. This allows us to create a new version of this build that can terrorize terror zones and quickly climb the ladder. But before we dive into what your ideal endgame build looks like, let's examine what makes a trapper so good in the early and mid game in the first place. When you start out as an assassin on a playthrough, you'll quickly become a team favorite, mainly because of a skill called Mind Blast. This is single-handedly the best crowd control skill in the game, converting enemies and turning them against each other. Not only does this take the heat off of you, but it tends to clump monsters together, which is very important for not only your traps, but for some clutch offensive and defensive team strategies. The Wake of Fire trap skill can rip through normal difficulty, and then Lightning and Death Sentry fare pretty well all throughout. Death Sentry is a great one-point wonder as it casts Corpse Explosion, further diversifying early damage. When you consider that nearly all of your trap skills are synergies for Fire Blast, you can see how well this build can fare against monster immunities even before you find yourself a Sunder Charm. The sheer power of the skills alone on this build make it so you don't really need much gear early on to start farming. In fact, I talked about how powerful this build is even completely naked in a previous video. But when you do start farming and getting yourself some gear in the mid game, this character really starts coming online. Even with this basic gear, you can farm just about any area in the game when we're talking full clears. Clearing massive amounts of high-level monsters is a good way to find high runes early on. And when you finally do find those sick deals on Diablo decks, JSP, in-game, or wherever you're at, you can start moving towards this version of the character, which is my personal goal for this season. In patch 2.6, negative enemy lightning resist works with Lightning Sentry. This is huge and may open the door for an entirely new main weapon on these Sins, Infinity. Not only does the Conviction aura rip away resistances, but it also has an inherent minus to enemy light resist on it. Additionally, the Conviction aura makes Fire Blast and Death Sentry hit even harder. The onslaught of varied attacks that can be delivered by this build is insane. Let me save you some time looking for bases. A Branda stock is the best weapon to make this in if you're putting it on an assassin. It has the fastest attack speed of all spears and polearms while boasting the lowest comparable stats. Faster attack speed is something that we still have to worry about because we'll be laying down traps. When we complement this Infinity with a Griffin's Eye and a Sunder Charm, even natural lightning immune monsters will have practically no resistance to our Lightning Sentry. And then when you consider what our Mercenary is using, It's a bad time to be a monster in D2. We'll get to that in a second. Whether you're walking or teleporting, Enigma is still the best choice. Ideally, a 220 amulet will help you hit some breakpoints, but if you ain't worried about that, Mars will do. The fire skills on Mage Fist not only work with Fire Blast, but also boost up Death Sentry, all while providing 20% cast. For boots, I would highly recommend getting Tri-Res boots with these 3 resistances, but you can also sacrifice your ring spots for resistance rings, which will help you with that as well. And now on to our mercenary. As much as it pains me to get rid of Emilio, Bill is alright. He's rocking a flickering flame, which should help us with our fire resist, and his dual plagues can help sunder enemies even further when lower resist procs. All the auras granted by this mercenary combined with the conviction aura also looks pretty dope. Now this is a disco Sin, boys. We've come full circle. You will certainly be sucking down more mana pots with this approach on the mercenary, but in my opinion, the clear speed is well worth it. The skill tree for this looks practically like a regular trapper. We put 1 point into Mind Blast, 1 point into Shadow Master, and 1 point into Fade, just in case you need to bump up your resistances. From there, we max Lightning Sentry and all of its synergies, 1 point into Death Sentry, max Fire Blast for a backup skill, and the rest of our points go into Wake of Fire, as it's a synergy for Fire Blast. As for the stats, it's pretty straightforward, just enough points into strength to wear all of your gear, and the rest of it into vitality. Even on players 8, this build will rip through most level 85 areas pretty easily. And when you figure that most people grind to 99 by going through these zones on players 8 with minimal assistance, this might be the best assassin build to get the job done. The negative resistance application to Lightning Sentry from this most recent patch is just what this build needed. People ask what the implications could be for PvP with this new change, and that could also be pretty interesting. Your opponents can stack as much lightning resist against you as they desire, so when they figure out what you're doing and prepare for it, this could just be a weaker trap Sin. However, in team duels, where it's difficult to solely focus and prepare for just one character, this girl could be a hero. The drawback in PvP is that by using Infinity, you're giving up weapon block because you're not using dual claws. It's an interesting all-in sort of approach for PvP, but I think we'll certainly see some Sins rocking this in pubs and teams in the new patch. I've linked D2 planner guides for each of the setups we talked about below, but what are your thoughts on the new patch and this new Trapper dynamic? Let me know down in the comments.